The mop moved across the floor in smooth, even strokes. Taeho hummed an old song from Earth as he worked. The melody echoed softly in the empty hallway. He had been cleaning these same floors for 8 years now, and he knew every corner, every tile, every spot where dirt liked to hide. The orbital palace of Throne Above Stars was the most beautiful place Taeho had ever seen. It floated in space above a purple planet, its walls made of crystal that caught starlight and turned it into rainbows. The palace was home to Emperor Malvarath and his family. It was the center of the Vexithari Empire, which ruled over 12 galaxies and billions of beings. Taeho was just a janitor here, a human janitor. That meant he was near the bottom of everything that mattered in this place. Humans had joined the Empire 10 years ago. Joined was a polite word for what really happened. The Vexithari had come to Earth with their massive ships and superior weapons. They gave humanity a choice: surrender and serve, or be destroyed. Earth's governments had chosen survival. Now humans worked throughout the Empire, doing the jobs nobody else wanted to do. They cleaned toilets, they hauled garbage, they scrubbed floors and fixed broken pipes. The aliens barely looked at them. To most of the Empire, humans were just soft, weak creatures who were useful for dirty work and nothing more. Taeho didn't mind the work itself. He had always believed that any honest job was worth doing well. Back on Earth before the conquest, he had owned a small cleaning business. He took pride in making things shine. His mother had taught him that cleanliness was next to dignity, and he had never forgotten that lesson. Still singing those weird songs? Hana's voice came from behind him. Taeho turned and smiled. Hana was another human janitor, younger than him by 20 years. She had bright eyes and a quick sense of humor that helped get them both through long shifts. "They're not weird," Taeho said. "They're classics." "They're old," Hana laughed. She pushed her own cleaning cart up next to his. "Did you hear about the big event this week?" "The Week of Ascendance," Taeho nodded. "Hard to miss it. The whole palace is decorated." Every wall had new banners hanging from it. The colors of the royal family, deep purple and silver, were everywhere. Servants rushed back and forth preparing for ceremonies. Even the air felt different, charged with importance. "It's for the youngest prince," Hana explained, though Taeho already knew. "Prince Vindrek. He has to complete 7 trials to prove he's worthy of being royal. If he fails any of them, they exile him. Can you imagine? He's just a child." Taeho frowned. He had seen Prince Vindrek a few times in passing. The young prince was small, even for his species. He had silver scales that caught the light and large eyes that always looked worried. Taeho guessed he was about 9 years old in human terms, though it was hard to tell with aliens. "That's a lot of pressure for someone so young," Taeho said quietly. "That's royalty for you," Hana shrugged. "Everything is about tradition and proving yourself. I'm glad I'm just a janitor. Nobody expects anything from us except clean floors." She waved goodbye and pushed her cart down another hallway. Taeho went back to his mopping. But his mind stayed on the young prince. 7 trials, public ceremonies, the eyes of the entire empire watching. What happened if the child made a mistake? What happened if he wasn't strong enough or smart enough or whatever they demanded he be? Taeho had a daughter back on Earth. Yoonji was 15 now. He hadn't seen her in 3 years, not since he had been assigned to the palace. The Empire didn't let humans travel freely. He sent her messages when he could, but it wasn't the same as being there. He wondered what she was doing right now. He wondered if she remembered the songs he used to sing to her. The hallway sparkled when he finished. Taeho stood back and examined his work. Perfect. Not a streak or spot anywhere. He knew the nobles would walk past tomorrow and never notice how clean it was. They only noticed when things were dirty. But that was fine. Taeho didn't do good work for recognition. He did it because it was the right thing to do. He moved to the next section, a rarely used corridor in the old part of the palace. This area was mostly forgotten, full of rooms that had once been important but now sat empty. Taeho was supposed to clean here once a week. Dust gathered in the corners, and the crystal walls had lost some of their shine. As he worked, he thought about home. He thought about Earth's yellow sun and blue sky. He thought about rain and the smell of fresh-cut grass. The palace was beautiful, but it wasn't home. It would never be home. A sound broke through his thoughts. Teho stopped mopping and listened. There it was again. Soft, quiet, almost hidden. Someone was crying. Teho set down his mop carefully. He walked slowly down the corridor, following the sound. It got louder as he moved. Not loud like screaming or wailing. Soft like a child trying not to be heard. Soft like someone who was afraid of being caught showing weakness. He turned a corner and stopped. There, sitting on the floor against the wall, was Prince Vindrek. The young prince had his head down. His small body shook with sobs. His ceremonial robes, purple and silver and covered in symbols Teho didn't understand, were wrinkled around him. And his feet, his small clawed feet, were tangled in the elaborate footwear that royal tradition required. The laces, or whatever they were called, had come completely undone. They lay in a confused mess around the prince's ankles. The young prince was pulling at them desperately, but his claws kept catching on the delicate material. Every time he tried to fix them, he made the knots worse. Teho stood very still. Every instinct told him to help. But he knew the rules. Humans weren't supposed to touch royalty. They weren't supposed to even speak to royalty unless spoken to first. And during the week of ascendance, the rules were even stricter. No one was allowed to help the prince with his trials. Not servants, not guards, not even his own family. But those rules had been made for servants who saw a prince. Teho saw a scared child who needed help. He took a step forward. Then another. The prince looked up, his large eyes wet with tears. He saw Teho and froze, clearly terrified of being discovered in such a vulnerable moment. Teho knelt down slowly. He kept his movements gentle and non-threatening. He looked at the tangled footwear, then back at the prince's face. "Would you like me to show you how?" Teho asked softly, in the simple trade language most species understood. The prince stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, the small alien nodded. Teho moved closer to the prince and looked at the tangled mess of laces. The ceremonial footwear was complex, made from materials that shimmered like metal but felt like cloth. The laces were supposed to wrap around the prince's ankles in a specific pattern, creating symbols that represented the royal bloodline. Right now, they just looked like chaos. "Okay," Teho said gently. "First, we need to undo all of this. Don't worry, we'll do it together." The prince sniffled and wiped at his eyes with the back of his clawed hand. Up close, Teho could see how young he really was. His scales were still bright, not yet dulled by age. His claws were small and not very sharp. He was just a child, dressed in clothes too heavy for his small frame and expected to perform tasks he didn't understand. "I'm supposed to know how to do this," the prince whispered. His voice shook. "Everyone knows how to do this. But I never learned. The servants always did it for me. Always. And now I can't ask them because of the trials. And I'm already late. If I show up late or if my footwear's wrong, I'll fail. And if I fail..." His voice broke and fresh tears rolled down his face. Teho's heart ached. He thought of Yunji again. He thought of all the times she had struggled with something new. Learning to tie her own shoes, learning to ride a bicycle, learning to be brave when she was scared. He had always been there to help her, to teach her, to remind her that not knowing something yet was okay. "Listen to me," Teho said firmly but kindly. "Not knowing something isn't failing. Everyone has to learn everything at some point. Even emperors had to learn to walk once." The prince looked at him with wide, surprised eyes. Nobody probably talked to him like this, but Teho was just a janitor. What did he have to lose? "Now," Teho continued, "let's untangle this together. See here? This part is caught on this part. If we gently pull it this way, it will come free." He guided the prince's clawed hands to the right spot. The prince pulled gently, and the knot loosened. A small smile appeared on his face. "Good," Teho encouraged. "You're doing it. Now this next part. See how it's wrapped around twice? We need to unwrap it." They worked together slowly. Teho didn't just do it for the prince. That wouldn't help. Instead, he showed the prince what to do, let him try it, and helped only when needed. It took longer this way, but the prince's confidence grew with each small success. "Why do you know how to do this?" the prince asked as they worked. "You're a human. This is Vexathari footwear. Very old tradition. Very complicated." Teho smiled. "I don't know your traditions, but I know knots. I know laces. Humans tie things all the time. Our shoes, our clothes, our packages. We tie knots for work and for art. Once you understand the basic idea, most knots are similar. Humans tie their own shoes?" The prince sounded amazed. "Don't your servants do it?" "Most humans don't have servants," Teho explained. "We learn to do things ourselves. My daughter learned to tie her shoes when she was about your age. I taught her the same way I'm teaching you." "You have a child?" The prince looked curious now, his tears drying. "Where is she?" "On Earth. I haven't seen her in 3 years." "That's sad," the prince said quietly. "I miss my mother when she's gone for even one day." They sat in silence for a moment, two beings from different worlds, sharing the simple sadness of missing someone you love. "Okay," Teho said, returning to the task. "Now we're ready to start tying. This is the important part. Watch carefully. We're going to go slow." He took the prince's hands in his own weathered ones. His human skin looked so different next to the prince's silver scales. Soft versus armored. Warm versus cool. But hands were hands, and they could learn. "First loop goes here," Teho guided. "Through this ring. Good. Now bring it around. Yes, like that. You're doing well." The prince concentrated hard. His tongue stuck out slightly, the way children of many species did when they focused. His claws were awkward at first, catching on the delicate material. But Teho was patient. He had all the time in the world. "Now this part makes a symbol," the prince explained. "It's supposed to look like the 3 moons of our home world." "Show me what it should look like," Teho said. "Then we'll figure out how to make it." The prince drew the symbol in the air with one claw. Teho studied it. It was basically a 3-loop knot with the ends crossing in the middle. Complex for a child, but not impossible. "Okay, I see it. Let's break it down into steps. First, we make 3 loops. Then we weave them together. Then we cross the ends. Can you make a loop?" The prince tried. His first attempt fell apart. Teho showed him again. The prince tried once more. This time the loop held. "Perfect," Teho grinned. "See? You can do this. Now 2 more just like that one." They worked together, step by careful step. The prince made mistakes. He got frustrated. But Teho never rushed him, never made him feel stupid, never took over and did it for him. He just kept teaching, kept encouraging, kept believing the prince could learn. After many attempts, the first footwear was properly tied. The symbol of the 3 moons sat perfectly on the prince's ankle. The prince stared at it in wonder. "I did it," he whispered. "I actually did it." "You did," Teho confirmed. "And now you can do the other one. This time, try to do it yourself. I'll watch and help if you need it." The prince nodded eagerly. His confidence had completely changed. He wasn't the crying child from before. He was someone who had learned something new and was proud of himself. The second footwear went faster. The prince still needed guidance, but he remembered the steps. His claws moved more surely. When he finished, he jumped to his feet and looked down at his properly tied ceremonial footwear with a huge smile. "Thank you," the prince said, looking at Teho with genuine gratitude. "Thank you so much. You saved me." "You saved yourself," Teho corrected gently. "I just showed you how. That's the important difference. Now you know. Next time you won't need anyone's help." The prince started to say something else, but a distant bell rang through the palace. His eyes widened in panic. "The trial! I have to go!" "Then go," Teho said, standing up and brushing off his uniform. "You'll do great." The prince ran a few steps, then stopped and looked back. "What's your name?" "Teho." "I'm Vindrek," the prince said. Then he smiled shyly. "But you probably already knew that." "Good luck, Vindrek," Teho said. The prince ran off, his properly tied footwear clicking on the crystal floor. Teho watched him go, then picked up his mop and went back to work. He didn't think much more about it. He had helped a child. That was enough. He didn't know that in a concealed observation room, Emperor Malvorath had watched everything. The Emperor stood before a viewing screen, his forearms crossed, his ancient eyes thoughtful. He had been monitoring his son's trials remotely, as tradition allowed. He had seen his son crying, he had seen him struggle, and he had seen a human janitor teach his son something that the entire palace full of servants and teachers had failed to teach him. The Emperor stood there for a long time after both the prince and the janitor had gone. He was thinking about shoes and knots and crying children, but he was also thinking about empires and power and the price of tradition. Something important had just happened. He was sure of that. He just didn't yet know what it would mean. Tae-ho woke up the next morning to banging on his door. He lived in the workers' quarters, a section of the palace where all the human staff had small rooms. The rooms were clean and functional, but nothing special. A bed, a desk, a small bathroom. Everything a person needed and nothing more. Tae-ho! Hana's voice came through the door. Tae-ho, wake up! He opened the door, still in his sleep clothes. Hana stood there with 3 other human workers. They all looked terrified. What's wrong? Tae-ho asked, worry flooding through him. The royal guards are looking for you, Hana said quickly. They're coming through the quarters right now, asking everyone where you are. Tae-ho, what did you do? Tae-ho's stomach dropped. He knew immediately what this was about. The prince, the footwear. He had broken protocol. He had touched royalty without permission. He had interfered in the sacred trials. I helped someone who needed it, Tae-ho said quietly. They're going to exile you, another worker said. Or worse. Tae-ho, you should run. Hide somewhere in the palace. Maybe we can sneak you onto a transport ship. Tae-ho shook his head. No, running would only make it worse. If they're looking for me, I'll face whatever comes. But Hana started to protest. Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. 4 royal guards appeared, their armor gleaming, their weapons visible. They were massive creatures, twice the height of any human, with 4 arms and faces hidden behind helmets. Tae-ho, human janitor? The lead guard asked in a deep voice. Yes, Tae-ho answered. His voice stayed steady even though his heart was racing. You are summoned to the throne room. Come with us, now. The other humans gasped. The throne room. That was where the Emperor himself held court. That was where judgment was passed on serious crimes. Hana grabbed Tae-ho's arm, her eyes full of tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. It's okay, Tae-ho told her. He hugged her briefly, then pulled away. Take care of my plants, will you? And if something happens to me, tell my daughter I love her. The guards didn't give him time to change into his work uniform. They marched him through the palace in his simple sleep clothes. Other workers, both human and alien, stopped to stare as they passed. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked curious. A few looked pleased that a human was finally getting what they thought humans deserved. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling stretched so high that Tae-ho couldn't see the top. The walls were made of crystal that showed the stars beyond. Hundreds of nobles filled the space, all dressed in their finest clothes. They stood on different levels, creating a sea of colors and faces that all turned to look at Tae-ho as he entered. At the far end of the room, on a throne that seemed carved from a single massive diamond, sat Emperor Malvorath. He was ancient, his scales dark with age, his 4 arms resting on the sides of his throne. His eyes, however, were sharp and aware. They fixed on Tae-ho with an intensity that made the human want to look away. But Tae-ho kept his eyes forward. If this was the end, he would face it with dignity. The guards brought him to the center of the room and made him kneel. The throne room fell silent. Every eye watched. Every ear listened. Tae-ho, human janitor, the Emperor's voice boomed through the space. It was deep and powerful, the voice of someone who had ruled for centuries. You are accused of touching a member of the royal family without permission. You are accused of interfering in the sacred week of ascendance. You are accused of violating protocols that have existed for 10,000 years. What do you say to these accusations? Taeho took a breath. I don't deny any of it, Your Majesty. I did those things. Murmurs rippled through the nobles. Some sounded shocked, others sounded satisfied. Here was a confession. The human had admitted his crimes. And why? The Emperor asked, leaning forward slightly. Did you commit these violations? Did you not know the law? I knew the law, Taeho said clearly. His voice echoed in the huge room. But I saw a child who was suffering. I saw someone who needed help. I couldn't walk past that. Law or no law? A child? An old noble's voice rang out from the crowd. That was Prince Vindrek, heir to the throne. Not some common child. He's both, Taeho said simply. He's a prince, yes, but he's also a child. And when a child is crying and scared, the right thing to do is help them. That's what I believe. That's what I did. The throne room erupted. Nobles shouted at each other. Some demanded immediate punishment. Others argued about protocol. The noise grew louder and louder until the Emperor raised one of his 4 hands. Silence fell instantly. You claim you helped my son, the Emperor said. Explain what you did. Taeho described it all. Finding the prince crying, the tangled footwear, the teaching, not just fixing. How the prince had learned to do it himself. How proud the young prince had been when he succeeded. You taught him, the Emperor said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Your Majesty, I didn't just tie his footwear for him. I showed him how to do it himself. So next time he wouldn't need anyone. Why? The Emperor asked. This time his voice was softer, genuinely curious. Why teach instead of simply doing it for him? It would have been faster. Taeho thought about how to explain. On my world, we have a saying. Give someone a fish, and they eat for a day. Teach someone to fish, and they eat for a lifetime. If I had just fixed his footwear, he would still be helpless the next time. But now he knows how. Now he can do it himself. That's better. That's real help. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked another question, and his voice carried throughout the room. Why do humans teach their young to do things themselves instead of having servants do everything? This was clearly the question that mattered. Taeho could feel it. He chose his words carefully. Because we believe that true strength comes from knowing how to do things yourself, Your Majesty, not from having others do things for you. A person who knows how to solve their own problems is stronger than someone who always needs help. We teach our children everything we can, not because we don't love them, but because we do. We want them to be capable. We want them to be independent. We want them to be able to face any challenge. Even royal children, asked the Emperor. Even those born to power? Especially them, Taeho said firmly. Because they'll face the hardest challenges of all. They need to be the strongest, the most capable. How can they lead others if they can't even tie their own shoes? The throne room was completely silent now. Every noble stared at Taeho. Some looked angry. Some looked thoughtful. A few looked afraid, as if they sensed something changing. You suggest, the Emperor said slowly, that my son should do things for himself that servants could do for him. I suggest, Your Majesty, that knowing how to do something and choosing to have servants do it is power. Not knowing how and having no choice is weakness. This human speaks madness, a noble shouted. He insults our traditions, our way of life. Execute him. Other voices joined in, demanding punishment. But the Emperor raised his hand again for silence. Then he did something that shocked everyone. Bring me Prince Vindrek, the Emperor commanded. A door opened and the young prince entered. He walked carefully, his footwear properly tied, his ceremonial robes neat. When he saw Taeho kneeling in the center of the room, his eyes widened with understanding and fear. My son, the Emperor said, show the court your footwear. Prince Vindrek looked confused but obeyed. He held up one foot, showing the intricate knots and symbols. Did servants tie this for you? The Emperor asked. No, father, the prince said softly. I did it myself. Gasps echoed through the room. A royal doing such a task himself? Impossible. Unthinkable. Show them, the Emperor commanded. Untie it and tie it again. The prince sat on the floor, right there in front of everyone. His claws were shaky, but he carefully untied the complex footwear. Then, step by step, he retied it. It took him longer than it would take a servant. He made a small mistake and had to redo one part. But he did it. He completed the task himself. When he finished, he stood up and looked at his father. The emperor's expression was unreadable. "My son," the emperor said, his voice filling the throne room, "has done something that no royal has done in living memory. He has learned a practical skill. He has performed a task with his own hands. And why? Because a human janitor taught him." The emperor stood from his throne. His massive form dominated the room. "I have watched the Vexthari Empire for centuries, and I have watched us grow weaker." The emperor's words hung in the air. The nobles shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke. To question the emperor was to risk everything, but his words challenged the very foundation of their society. "I have ruled for 800 years, Emperor Malvarath continued. His voice was not angry, but rather filled with a deep sadness. "I have seen my empire expand across galaxies. I have seen worlds bow before us. But I have also seen something else. Something we do not speak of. I have watched us become weak." "Your Majesty," an elderly noble dared to speak. "The empire is strong. We have never been defeated in battle. Our technology is superior to—" "Our generals do not understand the weapons they command," the emperor interrupted. His words cut like a blade. "They have servants who understand them. Our administrators cannot perform the tasks they oversee. They have servants who do it for them. Our architects cannot build. Our engineers cannot repair. Our teachers cannot teach because they themselves do not know. We have become a civilization of people who know only how to command, not how to do." The emperor began to walk down from his throne. Each step echoed in the silent room. He moved like a predator, powerful and dangerous. 300 years ago, one of my ancestors made a mistake. He declared that the nobility should be freed from all practical tasks, that servants should do everything. It was meant to give our people time for higher thoughts, for art and philosophy and leadership. Instead, it created generations who cannot survive without servants, who cannot function without being told what to do and how to do it. He reached Tai-Ho and looked down at the kneeling human. "Yesterday I watched my youngest son fail at a simple task. I watched him cry because he could not tie his own footwear. I was ready to see him fail his trials. I was ready to see him exiled, as our law demands. But then I watched something else." The emperor turned to address the entire court. "I watched a human janitor kneel beside my son. I watched him teach patiently. I watched him give my son something that all our wealth and power could not provide. He gave him knowledge. He gave him capability. He gave him the ability to solve his own problem. But Your Majesty," another noble protested, "the humans are beneath us. They are a conquered species. They serve us. How can they teach us anything?" "That," the emperor said coldly, "is exactly the thinking that has destroyed us. We believe ourselves superior because we have power. But what good is power if you cannot use it? What good is knowledge if you cannot teach it? What good is an empire if its people are helpless?" Prince Vindrick stood near his father, looking small and uncertain. The emperor placed one of his hands on his son's shoulder. "My son completed his trials yesterday. He passed every test. Do you know why? Because for the first time in his life, he felt capable. He knew he could do something difficult with his own hands. That confidence changed everything." The emperor's eyes swept across the assembled nobles. "I have been studying the humans since they joined our empire. At first, I thought them weak. Their bodies are fragile. They have no natural weapons, no tough skin, no enhanced strength. But I was wrong about their weakness. Humans are not weak. They are perhaps the strongest species I have encountered." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Humans? Strong? It seemed impossible. "Their strength is not in their bodies," the emperor explained. "It is in their culture. Every human child, from the richest to the poorest, is taught to do things for themselves. They are taught to solve problems. They are taught that all honest work has dignity. A human leader knows how to clean because they were taught to clean. A human general understands their weapons because they were taught to use them. They do not rely on others for their most basic needs. The Emperor's voice grew stronger. And this is why they have survived everything their harsh world threw at them. Wars, diseases, famines, disasters. They survived because every human is capable. Every human can adapt. Every human knows how to work. Taeho remained kneeling, hardly daring to breathe. Was the Emperor really praising humanity in front of the entire court? It seemed impossible. Yet the words continued. Yesterday, a human janitor did in minutes what our entire system has failed to do. He taught self-reliance. He taught capability. He taught my son that not knowing something is not the same as being weak, that learning is strength, that doing things yourself is power. The Emperor returned to his throne and sat down. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Therefore, I am making a decree that will change this empire. From this day forward, we will learn from the humans. We will adopt their ways. We will teach our children to be capable, not dependent. The throne room erupted. Nobles shouted. Some in agreement, many more in horror. The noise was deafening. The Emperor let them shout for a moment, then raised his hand. The silence that followed was immediate. I am establishing the Human Education Initiative, the Emperor declared. Humans will no longer serve only as janitors and maintenance workers. They will be teachers. They will be advisors. They will teach us what they know, and we will learn. This is madness. A powerful noble stepped forward. He was large, his scales decorated with symbols of military rank. Your Majesty, with respect, the humans are conquered. They are servants. To elevate them above their station is to invite chaos. It undermines the entire structure of our society. Our society's structure is what I am trying to save, the Emperor responded. His voice was cold now. I have watched our military commanders lose battles they should have won because they did not understand their own equipment. I have watched colonies fail because our administrators could not solve simple problems. I have watched our young nobles grow into useless adults who cannot survive a single day without 100 servants. If we continue on this path, our empire will collapse from within. We will become so weak that any strong species could defeat us. He pointed at Taeho. This human owns nothing. He has no power, no status, no wealth. Yet he possesses something we have lost. Knowledge, skill, the ability to teach. I am naming him as the first practical wisdom instructor to the royal household. He will teach my children. He will teach me. And other humans will teach throughout the empire. Father, Prince Vindrek spoke up. His young voice brave in the massive room. I would like Taeho to be my tutor, please. The Emperor looked at his son and something like pride crossed his ancient face. It will be so. This is unacceptable. The military noble's voice rose. I will not stand by and watch humans elevated above us. I will not. You will obey, the Emperor said simply. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room with an undeniable power. Or you will be exiled. Those are your choices. I am Emperor. My word is law. This is not a discussion. This is a command. The noble's face darkened with rage, but he said nothing more. He and several others turned and walked out of the throne room. The message was clear. They would not accept this easily. The Emperor watched them go. Then he looked at Taeho, who was still kneeling. Stand up, Taeho. You are a janitor no longer. Taeho stood on shaky legs. He felt like he was in a dream. This couldn't be real. He was supposed to be punished, possibly executed. Instead, the Emperor was making him a teacher to royalty. Your Majesty, Taeho said quietly. I don't know if I can do what you're asking. I'm just one person. I'm not a trained teacher. I just know how to tie shoes and clean floors and fix basic things. That, the Emperor said, is more than most of my nobles know. You will not be alone. Other humans will join you. Together, you will teach us what we have forgotten. That capability matters more than status. That knowing how to do things is real power. The Emperor stood again and addressed the remaining nobles. This change will not be easy. Many of you will resist. Some already are, but it will happen. Starting today, All young nobles will learn practical skills. They will be taught by humans. They will learn to do things with their own hands, and we will become strong again. He looked at Tae-ho one more time. You saved my son yesterday. Today, you may save my empire. I hope you are ready for this task. Tae-ho thought of his daughter on Earth. He thought of all the humans working throughout the empire, invisible and ignored. He thought of what this could mean for them. A chance to be seen as equals. A chance to teach instead of just serve. It was terrifying. But it was also hope. I'll do my best, Your Majesty, Tae-ho said. That, the Emperor replied, is all I ask. 6 months had passed since that day in the throne room. 6 months since the Human Education Initiative had begun. 6 months since everything changed. Tae-ho walked through the palace gardens, watching the sun set through the crystal dome above. The gardens were beautiful, full of plants from a dozen different worlds. Purple flowers that sang in the wind. Silver grass that glowed in the dark. Trees with bark that changed colors with the seasons. It was peaceful here, a place to think. Tae-ho, a familiar voice called out. He turned to see Prince Vindrek running toward him. The young prince was no longer wearing his heavy ceremonial robes. Instead, he wore simple practical clothes, much like what Tae-ho wore. His footwear was tied perfectly. Your Highness, Tae-ho greeted him with a smile. I told you to stop calling me that when we're alone, the prince laughed. He had grown in these 6 months, not just physically but in confidence. Did you finish your meeting with the Emperor? Just now, Tae-ho nodded. He wanted to discuss expanding the education program to 3 more systems. The changes had started slowly. At first, only the royal family participated. Tae-ho had taught Prince Vindrek and his siblings. He taught them basic tasks: how to clean, how to cook simple meals, how to repair broken things, how to solve problems without calling for servants. The other nobles had watched with horror at first. Royal children doing servant work? It was scandalous. But then something interesting happened. The children liked it. They enjoyed learning. They were proud when they accomplished things themselves, and that pride made them better at everything else they did. Hana had joined Tae-ho after the first month. She taught the older princes about resource management and efficiency, how to do more with less, how to waste nothing, skills that humans had learned from living on a world with limited resources. Soon, other humans joined. Each brought their own knowledge. Engineers, farmers, cooks, mechanics. People who knew how to do things, not just command others to do them. How are your students doing? The prince asked as they walked together through the gardens. Tae-ho taught a class now. 20 young nobles, ages ranging from 8 to 15. They're improving. Young Hyo-jin can now disassemble and reassemble a basic engine. Sumi learned to cook a full meal yesterday. They're all working hard. Some of the older nobles still complain, the prince said. I heard Lord Kavrek say it was degrading. I know, Tae-ho sighed. Change is always hard, especially for those who benefited from the old way. Not everyone had accepted the new system. Some nobles refused to participate. They kept their children away from the human teachers. They spoke openly about how the emperor had gone mad, how humans were corrupting their society. A group of conservative nobles had even tried to organize a protest 3 months ago. But the emperor had stood firm. He made it clear that learning these skills was not optional for anyone who wanted to hold power in the empire. Those who refused would not be given positions of authority. Slowly, resistance began to crumble. It was hard to argue with the results. The young nobles who learned from the humans were performing better in all their studies. They were more confident, more capable, more creative in solving problems. They understood the systems they were supposed to manage because they had learned to operate those systems themselves. They made better leaders because they understood what they were leading. The emperor himself takes lessons now, the prince said with a grin. Did you know that? Tae-ho did know. Hana taught the emperor twice a week about efficiency and resource management. It was strange to imagine. The ruler of 12 galaxies, learning from a human who had once scrubbed toilets. But the emperor took it seriously. He believed that if he asked his people to change, he had to change first. They reached a quiet part of the garden where stone benches sat under a tree with golden leaves. Prince Vindrek sat down, and Teho joined him. "Can I tell you something?" the prince asked quietly. "Of course." "I was so scared before," the young prince said. "Before you taught me to tie my shoes. I was scared all the time. Scared of failing. Scared of not being good enough. Scared that I couldn't do what everyone expected of me." "And now?" Teho asked gently. "Now I'm still scared sometimes," the prince admitted. "But it's different. Now I know that not being able to do something just means I haven't learned it yet. I know I can learn. I know I can get better. You showed me that." Teho felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You taught yourself that, Vindrek. I just gave you the first push." "You gave me more than that," the prince said. He looked at Teho with those large eyes, now filled with warmth instead of tears. "You gave me hope, and you gave our whole empire hope, even if some people don't see it yet." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the artificial sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. Finally, the prince spoke again. "Do you still miss Earth? Your daughter?" "Every day," Teho admitted. "But I got a message from her last week. She's proud of me. She said she tells everyone that her father is teaching princes and changing an empire. That helps." "Maybe she can visit someday," the prince suggested, "when things are more settled. I'd like to meet her." "I'd like that too," Teho smiled. A small chime sounded. The prince checked a device on his wrist. "I have to go. I'm supposed to help prepare dinner tonight. It's my turn." "You're cooking for the royal family?" Teho asked, impressed. "Well, helping cook," the prince laughed. "I'm not that good yet. But I'm learning. See you tomorrow?" "Same time. We're learning about basic electrical repairs." The prince waved and ran off, full of energy and life. Teho watched him go, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. 6 months ago, that prince had been crying on the floor, helpless and afraid. Now he was confident, capable, and eager to learn more. Teho stood and started walking back to his quarters. They weren't in the workers' section anymore. The human teachers had been given rooms in a better part of the palace, closer to their students. His room was larger now, with a window that looked out at the stars. But he still kept it simple and clean. Old habits didn't die easily. As he walked, he passed other humans. They nodded to him with respect. Some stopped to talk. They shared stories about their students, their successes and challenges. The humans were no longer invisible. They were seen. They were valued. It wasn't perfect equality yet, but it was progress. He also passed young nobles who greeted him respectfully. "Good evening, Teacher Teho," they would say. Teacher, not janitor, not servant, teacher. The change in that single word meant everything. Back in his room, Teho prepared for the next day's lessons. He still sometimes couldn't believe this was his life now. From janitor to teacher. From invisible to important. All because he had helped a crying child tie his shoes. He thought about what the emperor had said in their meeting today. The program was working. Crime was down in areas where nobles learned practical skills because they understood the lives of ordinary people better. Efficiency was up because administrators understood the systems they managed. Military effectiveness was improving because commanders knew their equipment. The empire was getting stronger, not through conquest but through education. There was still resistance. Some noble families refused to change. There had been threats, even a few minor incidents, but the momentum was building. More and more families wanted their children to learn from the humans. They saw the results. They saw the difference. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Hana standing there with a basket of food. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, coming in without waiting for an invitation. "You always forget to eat when you're planning lessons." "Thank you," Teho smiled. They sat together and shared the meal. "How was your day?" "Exhausting," Hana laughed. "I'm teaching 12 nobles about supply chain management. Do you know how hard it is to explain why wasting resources is bad to people who have never lacked for anything?" "I can imagine," Teho chuckled. "But they're learning," Hana continued. "Slowly. One of them actually apologized today for wasting food. said she never thought about where it came from before. That's progress. They talked about their students, their challenges, their small victories. It felt good to share the burden with someone who understood. Finally, Hana stood to leave. You know, she said at the door, when I first came to this palace, I thought I'd spend my whole life invisible. Just another human cleaning up after aliens. Never imagined I'd be teaching efficiency to an emperor. Life is strange, Taeho agreed. No, Hana said, thoughtfully. Life is full of opportunities. We just have to be brave enough to take them when they appear. Like you were brave enough to help a crying prince. After she left, Taeho stood at his window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere was his daughter. Somewhere were all the humans still working in darkness, still invisible, still waiting for change to reach them. But change was coming. Slowly, like a sunrise, it was spreading across the empire. One student at a time. One lesson at a time. One person learning that they were capable of more than they ever imagined. Taeho remembered something his father had told him long ago. The measure of civilization isn't what you can make others do for you. It's what you can teach others to do for themselves. His father had been a simple man, a farmer on Earth. He had never traveled to space or met alien emperors. But he had been wise. And that wisdom, passed down through generations of humans who had to work hard and learn to survive, was now changing an entire empire. Tomorrow, Taeho would teach more students. He would show them how to fix broken things and solve problems. He would teach them that knowledge was power, that capability was strength, that learning never stopped. And slowly, lesson by lesson, the empire would change. It wasn't the change anyone had expected. It didn't come from war or technology or political revolution. It came from a simple act of kindness. From a janitor who saw a crying child and chose to help. From teaching someone to tie their shoes. Sometimes, Taeho thought, the smallest actions create the biggest changes. Sometimes all it takes to change the world is one person willing to kneel down and show another person that they can do more than they ever thought possible. He smiled and went to bed, ready for another day of teaching, another day of change, another day of building a better future. One knot at a time.